The morning sun broke across the Pacific horizon, casting golden light over Naval Station Pearl Harbor. Commander Jake Harrison stood on the deck of the USS Valiant, his chest puffed with pride as he surveyed his domain. 22 years of service had carved deep lines into his weathered face, each one a badge of honor from countless deployments across hostile waters. Jake had earned his reputation the hard way. He started as a wide-eyed recruit who could barely tie a proper knot. Through sheer determination and grit, he climbed the ranks. His men respected him, or at least they feared disappointing him. He ran a tight ship, demanded excellence, and had zero tolerance for weakness or incompetence. The crew was preparing for a major inspection. In 2 days, a new admiral would be taking command, and everyone was on edge. Jake thrived in this kind of pressure. He barked orders with the confidence of someone who had seen and done it all. Sailors scrambled across the deck, polishing brass fixtures until they gleamed, making sure every inch was inspection ready. Jake's second-in-command, Lieutenant Marcus Chen, approached. Marcus was the buffer between Jake's harsh methods and the crew's morale. "Commander, the supply inventory is complete. We're still waiting on the final personnel roster for the inspection detail." "Good," Jake grunted. "Make sure everyone knows what's at stake here. This new admiral has a reputation for being tough. I heard she served in the Gulf and won't tolerate any nonsense?" Marcus nodded but hesitated. "Sir, about the admiral being a woman." "What about it?" Jake interrupted. "You think I have a problem with female officers? If they can do the job, I don't care what gender they are. But they still have to earn my respect like everyone else." Jake's blind spot was his unwavering belief in the old ways. The morning passed in a blur. Jake inspected every corner. He found a loose fitting in the engine room and made the officer redo it 3 times. He discovered scuff marks in the mess hall and had the area scrubbed again. His reputation for perfectionism wasn't just talk. By noon, the heat was sweltering. The crew was exhausted, but Jake showed no signs of slowing down. He believed comfort bred complacency. "Listen up. Tomorrow we do a full dress rehearsal. I want every man and woman on this ship to be flawless. The Valiant has never failed under my watch." As afternoon wore on, Jake retreated to his quarters. His cabin was sparse, decorated with commendations and a faded picture of his father. He read the memo again. Admiral Patricia Morrison, 52 years old, distinguished service record. Rumor said she was tough as nails. Jake wasn't worried, but the tension was there. The thought of someone new coming in with different methods made him uncomfortable. He didn't know his entire world was about to be turned upside down.
The Ground Report. Investigative Analysis into Naval Leadership and the Friction of Command. Episode, The Observer, NUS. The morning arrived with a humidity that made breathing feel like work. Commander Jake Harrison was on deck before the sun, NUS. He hadn't slept. His mind was a loop of inspection scenarios, the constant vigilance that had kept his sailors safe for 20 years. NUS. By 7 o'clock, the ship was a hive of controlled chaos, fire suppression, man overboard, engine failure drills, NUS. Jake found flaws in every exercise. Reaction times, knot tying, the minor imperfections that keep a captain awake at night. NUS. Mid-morning brought a disruption. A small personnel transport boat approached the hull, cutting through his scheduled discipline. NUS. "Sir, we have an unscheduled visitor," Marcus reported. "Says she's here to observe our operations." NUS. Jake's jaw tightened. "Observe? We don't need observers. We need to prepare." He watched a figure ascending the gangway. NUS. It was a classic friction, the tension between those who earned their knowledge through experience and the academic observers. NUS. She wasn't what he expected. No uniform, no insignia, just a civilian contractor carrying a backpack and a sense of easy confidence. NUS. "Commander Harrison," he said with professional courtesy. "I understand you're here to observe." NUS. "Hope I'm not getting in the way," she replied. Her voice was calm, measured, a slight East Coast accent. NUS. "Stay behind the yellow safety lines at all times," Jake warned. "We can't have civilians wandering into active operations." NUS. He spoke in clipped technical language, viewing the tour as a distraction from the real work. But her questions were specific. NUS. "You seem to know a bit about ships," Jake grudgingly observed. "I've been around the Navy most of my life," she replied. NUS. Then he saw it. A young sailor fresh out of training, fumbling with a critical pressure valve. Basic maintenance gone wrong. NUS. No, 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 Jake barked. He snatched the tool. How did you get through training without learning this? NUS. For Harrison, it wasn't about being harsh, it was about survival. Slack off on maintenance and people die. It's that simple. NUS. Rookie mistake, Jake muttered to her. She looked at the boy. Everyone has to start somewhere, even you. NUS. Jake bristled. Wait until this crew is in actual danger, then harsh doesn't matter, only competence matters. NUS. They reached the heart of the ship, the bridge. This was where decisions were made, where Jake felt most at home. NUS. Everything you see here is state-of-the-art, Jake said, maintained to perfection. His pride was finally showing. NUS. She paused at the captain's chair. A look of genuine nostalgia crossed her face as she touched the worn leather. NUS. Beautiful ship, she whispered. It was the first genuine compliment he'd heard. It softened his edge, if only for a second. NUS. Jake escorted her back to the gangway, relieved to return to his drills. He had no idea their next meeting would be very different. NUS. An observer in hiking boots. A commander obsessed with precision. The inspection was just beginning. Next time on the ground report. NUS.
The next day dawned with clouds gathering. Commander Jake Harrison was in his element on the deck, conducting a personnel inspection with an eye that evaluated thousands. Unacceptable, he barked at a petty officer. To Jake, these details weren't small. They were indicators of discipline and pride, but his focus was about to be challenged. I said no visitors? Jake's irritation flared as the contractor returned. He saw her as a disruption, a civilian who didn't understand military priorities. Then a hose slipped. High-pressure water drenched her instantly. Silence fell over the deck. Jake should have apologized. Instead, he laughed. This is what happens when civilians get in the way, he sneered. He didn't see the disappointment in her eyes, nor the evaluation she was making of his character. He had no idea. Within 24 hours, he'd be staring at those same eyes, but they'd be beneath an admiral's cap. 4 stars were about to change his life. I like to see how a ship really operates before making my presence known, she would tell him. Jake Harrison had never been more wrong. The ground report. Character is revealed in the moments we think we're alone. Until next time.
In the Navy, rank is often equated with visibility. But for Admiral Patricia Morrison, true leadership is found in the shadows, observing the reality that formal inspections miss. She shed her civilian identity for a borrowed uniform. She wasn't angry, she was calculating, gathering intelligence in the quiet of the ship. A single call to her chief of staff changed everything. No advance notice, she ordered. She wanted to peel back the curtain of military performance. Marcus spoke of a commander who confused harshness with strength, a man who believed breaking sailors down was the only way to build them up. But Morrison understood that leadership meant inspiring excellence, not demanding it through intimidation. Rank is about responsibility, not superiority. She disappeared into the crowd. One more day of anonymity before the truth would shatter the assumptions of the USS Valiant. A hard lesson in respect was coming. Tomorrow, the commander who soaked a contractor would have to salute his commanding officer. This is the ground report.
On the USS Valiant, a lesson in leadership was hidden beneath a borrowed uniform and the heavy mist of Pearl Harbor. Admiral Morrison visited her fleet informally, choosing to see the truth of her command rather than the theater of a formal inspection. She found Commander Harrison, a man of technical excellence but rigid authority, who believed breaking sailors down was the only way to build them up. Harrison forgot that true discipline is built on respect, not intimidation. In the modern Navy, fear is a relic of the past. As night fell, Morrison prepared her lesson. Tomorrow, the commander who soaked the rookie would have to salute the admiral. The curtain was ready to rise on a legend of the fleet. A story of authority redefined and a hard lesson in the geometry of respect. Because the most powerful weapon in any fleet isn't the ship, it's the respect earned from the people who sail her.
The wardroom of the USS Valiant felt smaller than usual. Admiral Morrison was there to deliver a hard truth about command and the ghosts of the past. She asked about his father. Jake remembered a man who believed if you weren't getting yelled at, you weren't learning. A cycle of trauma disguised as tradition. But Morrison challenged that. Breaking people down often just breaks them. True leadership is about respect and dignity, not fear. Jake had prioritized his rank over human decency. Morrison offered him a second chance, but only if he was brave enough to change. Jake stood his ground and apologized. He realized that being a commander meant being human enough to admit when you're wrong. Her mercy turned a mediocre officer into a leader who could make a difference. She was paying it forward. This is the ground report, analyzing the courage to grow.
The news of Harrison's humiliation spread faster than any official communication. Every sailor knew their tough commander had been put in his place. Jake saw it in the silence that followed him. But beneath the fear, there was hope. Their commander had been humbled, and they wanted to see what came next. He found Rodriguez in the engine room. For a man who never learned to apologize, the words were hard. "Rodriguez, I owe you an apology. I was wrong." Jake admitted his failure. It should have been a teaching moment, not a demonstration of authority. For the first time, the boy stood a little taller. Next was Miller in the mess hall. Jake canceled the punishment. "It was an accident," he said. "Admiral Morrison doesn't blame you, and neither do I." Over the next few days, the ship began to change. Mentoring programs replaced public humiliations. Feedback sessions replaced rigid silence. It wasn't easy. Jake's instincts pushed him toward old patterns. He felt like he was losing himself, but Chen reminded him, leadership is just another skill. Jake implemented a recognition program, a weekly coffee hour. No rank, just conversations. He was learning to be approachable, to be better. In headquarters, Morrison watched. Real change takes time, she knew, but Jake Harrison had his second chance, and that is what leadership is truly about.
On the USS Valiant, Commander Jake Harrison was rewriting a culture built on fear. The changes were small, but the impact was profound. He started by greeting sailors by name. Weekly coffee hours became a space for vulnerability, a start to humanizing the chain of command. Petty Officer Williams noted the shift. People were less stressed, less afraid to fail. For the first time, the crew could finally breathe. But resistance remained. Senior chiefs like Davis viewed kindness as a liability. They believed excellence was only forged through pressure. Jake challenged them. Fear might produce compliance, but never loyalty. Standards and respect, he argued, were not mutually exclusive. He spoke of Admiral Morrison's mirror, the gift of seeing his own flaws. He asked the chiefs to be partners in this new, humane era. In San Diego, Jake became a student of emotional intelligence. He learned that leadership is not about perfection, but presence and authenticity. Writing from Rodriguez's perspective, Jake finally felt the weight of his past harshness. He had missed the emotional reality of his crew. He learned to give himself grace. Leadership, he realized, is a commitment to continuous improvement, a journey that never truly ends. True leadership is the trust you build. On the Valiant, a new era has begun, one of informed courage and disciplined intelligence. This is the ground report.
2 months after the inspection incident, Admiral Morrison made an unannounced return visit to the USS Valiant. This time there was no deception, only a request for informal observation. Jake Harrison felt a flash of the old panic, but he took a long, steadying breath. He couldn't control the Admiral's evaluation, only his own authenticity. He met her at the gangway, meeting her sharp gaze with a new kind of confidence. This wasn't a performance. It was the truth of his command. As they toured the ship, the atmosphere was palpably different. Morrison's sharp eyes missed nothing, but for once, Jake didn't feel judged. In the engine room, Seaman Rodriguez greeted them with a genuine smile. The fear that once paralyzed this space had been replaced by a quiet pride. Jake explained that confidence, not fear, was the new engine of their performance. "Turns out when you value people, they do better," he noted. "Who knew?" Morrison noticed the peer-nominated recognition boards, physical proof that every sailor on the Valiant was now being seen and appreciated. The interactions were natural, genuine. There was still respect for the rank, but there was also a sense of community that hadn't existed 2 months ago. They moved to the wardroom for coffee, the same place where Morrison had once dismantled his pride and his career. She was direct. She had come to see if the changes were genuine or just performative. Her verdict? She was deeply impressed. The transformation was deeper than surface-level compliance. Jake let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding for 2 long months. Jake didn't hide his struggle. He admitted he still fought his old patterns, his old instincts to lead with a heavy, crushing hand. He spoke of his father, a hard man who taught him that hardness was the only true strength. Jake had spent his life trying to live up to that ghost. But now, Jake was learning that real strength is being vulnerable enough to admit when you're wrong and compassionate enough to see the human. Morrison revealed the data. Performance metrics were up across the board. Response times were faster, and retention had shot up dramatically. Turns out, when people feel valued, they perform better. She echoed his earlier words back to him with a knowing smile. Who knew? She didn't just approve. She invited him to mentor others in the Pacific Fleet's new leadership initiative. She saw him as an asset, not a liability. It needs leaders who are willing to grow. Jake accepted the honor, feeling the immense weight and privilege of her hard-won trust. Later, on the deck with Marcus Chen, Jake wrestled with the ghost of his past. He spoke of the years he had led the wrong way and the damage he'd done. Marcus offered the only cure. Redemption isn't perfection. It's the courage to be better today and to share what you've learned with others. That evening, Jake addressed the entire crew. He didn't speak from a pedestal. He spoke from the heart, thanking them for their patience and a second chance. Their applause was the sound of a ship that had finally found its soul. It wasn't the required applause of a ceremony. It was a heartfelt connection. Jake returned to his quarters with a hard-won peace. Vulnerability wasn't a weakness. It was the foundation of everything he had ever wanted to build.
6 months passed, and the transformation of the USS Valiant became case study material in naval leadership courses. Jake Harrison had become a symbol of redemption. He shared his story honestly with his mentee, Lieutenant Commander Mendez, who ruled through fear, a mirror image of the man Jake used to be. He told her, "The worst part wasn't being wrong. It was realizing how many people I had hurt. You can demand excellence without creating fear." On the Valiant, the culture had fully taken root. Seaman Rodriguez, once a struggling recruit, had become a confident leader among his peers. Even Chief Davis, once the loudest skeptic, admitted that you could demand high standards while treating people with genuine respect. The annual fleet inspection went flawlessly. The inspecting Admiral noted that this was exactly the kind of ship the Navy needs more of. Admiral Morrison called him later. "Jake, you've become an exceptional leader. Not just a good commander, but someone who makes everyone around him better." The crew presented him with a photo inscribed with a simple truth, that true strength includes kindness, and the best leaders never stop learning. Jake was promoted to captain and eventually retired as a rear admiral, having influenced a generation with his story of humility and growth. The real story wasn't about the humiliation on the pier, it was about the transformation that followed, a lifetime of choosing growth over ego.